Hey, welcome everybody. This has been a really exciting call that we've tried really hard to make happen, and I'm really glad that we're here. We're super excited to welcome our very dear friend and mentor and all the things, Celeste Lazaris, founder of BTMM, as everybody knows. And I am lucky enough to be an apprentice trainer for her and very grateful for everything that I've learned and um, very touched by how impactful this work has been and the way in which I've been able to bring it into all the ponies that I very luckily get to play with all the time because they and we are all better for it. So thank you for being with us. Go ahead.
You're welcome. It's so good to be here. I'm really excited because I've been wanting to learn much more about the myofascial lines and how all of that connects anyway. So to me, it's like just as much of a learning experience. So it'd be really cool. I think for I guess we're just going to go in and just do a really general rundown of the pillars for those that are not familiar, or even if you are familiar, just like as a little refresher. And then we'll go into talking about how that relates to the fascial lines and back and forth, because there's pretty much 100% crossover between the two. And it's really cool to learn about it. So with pillar one, the first and foremost, we call it relationship to connection because it's about whether or not the horse feels safe to be touched. When we talk about a horse being able to find pillar one, there are three basic components to it. First and foremost, does the horse understand like the training component? I shouldn't say first and foremost, they're kind of interchangeable, but does the horse have the training to understand what it is we're asking? To signals to the halter is what we would call it, or signals to the cavesson. So does a horse understand up, down, left, right? It's just like a video game controller. Very simple, very straightforward. Do they understand the ask? Because if they don't have that and they don't understand the ask, when you're sitting there going head down, head down, head down, which is not what pillar one is, but is frequently what people perceive it as. When you're asking that, they don't understand what you're asking. So we, really like to go through and make sure that the actual signals to the halter and the cavesson are on. The second component to it is, does the horse feel safe in their environment and safe with their handler? When we are asking the horse to go into pillar one, what we are asking them to do is to essentially relax the muscles that keep them safe and keep them more in the sympathetic, and then to go into, more of their grounding muscles. In very basic terms, horses have movement of muscles of movement and muscles of stabilization, just like humans. And most of the time, they are using their muscles of movement as muscles of stabilization. And so we come in and we try to rewire that a little bit and reset some things. So if they don't feel safe in their environment, they don't want to turn off those sympathetic muscles. And then that's a whole other issue that you have to go through. So you're going to check that box and make sure that's good. And then, more or less, lastly, the main thing about whether or not they have the ability to come down and soften into that, releasing that brachiocephalicus and really trying to, you know, get it out of this backwards contraction that it's usually stuck in when the spine is stuck in extension. The horse needs to be comfortable going over its feet. Maybe we had that really cool lesson with Franklin when I was like, he can't do it because he's leaning forward. I guess we would call that baby pillar two because it's not technically pillar two, but oftentimes you see horses, and we'll show pictures here at the end where, and most of you can go out and watch your horses stand, and you'll see them tipped forward a little bit, and so they're leaning over, their can bones are a little crooked, and their shoulders, their legs are underneath, they're not stacked underneath their shoulders the way they're supposed to. Their joints aren't stacked is how we say it. But when they can't find that, when they're leaning over and they're not actually stacked over their feet, whether it's because they have hoof pain or they just don't understand the posture because they've been stuck pulled forward for a long time, there's many components to it. But if they don't feel comfortable or they don't know how to balance back over their body, they're not able to really let go of those deep cervical muscles that we're wanting them to relax and elongate as we're finding pillar one.
Again, with this line, you can see, right? We always say, the TMJ is connected to the sternum, and it's also connected to the hoof. And so I think this is another nice line that paints that picture that, if you have issues with the TMJ, how that could trickle and cause the sternum to have slight rotation. It could impact that hind hoof. It could impact deep into the pelvis, and so on and so forth. I often find this line more of that locked along, like it's being pulled down by gravity. And the superficial dorsal line and the ventral line, it should have this constant back and forth. Both of these lines are connected, so it creates this one nice little circuit. And so there should constantly be this back and forth of flexion and extension between both of them. But I feel like most horses, what I find is gravity is just dragging both of them down. And so we have the superficial dorsal line is locked short and this ventral line is locked long. So our dorsal line is going to start at the coffin bone, and then it's going to travel up the flexors of the hind limb, travels up along the spine, up the neck, and into the pole and the fascia around the TMJ. So those of you guys that understand anatomy, you can kind of imagine what muscles and structures would be associated with all of this. And this is also known as the emotional line, right? So if a horse is startled, they're going to have that fight, flight, or freeze, and they always get high-headed and everything tenses in that line. So there's a lot of fascia holds a lot of emotions as well. So this is just a highly emotional line that things often get stuck. And I think that's why I see so many horses, and I'm sure you guys do as well, that are just stuck in this posture of it being so contracted. So this is going to support posture and spinal alignment. It supports flexion of the hock and the stifle. And it's just going to create a lot of stiffness around the neck and back. Often the horse, we've talked about this, but they'll be stuck in extension. I feel like hissing spines, this is my own personal, that it's a fascial disease, that it's just poor posture on the fascias. The fascia is just doing its job. The fascia wants to just stabilize. And so it's trying to stabilize the vertebrae and so it's just drawing them closer to closer because of poor posture. And you can imagine what, if that was a rubber band and you were to tighten that rubber band, what it would do to those spinous processes.
We see that with the DSLD too. It's obviously when you're getting ultrasounds and there's actual lesions and you're seeing the differences, that's one thing. But I see a lot of horses that are precursors to it, and that is in this line, that superficial dorsal line, because everything just starts to drop down. And then as we get them to activate, whether it's through pillar work or surefoot or the different things that we're doing, all of a sudden that line contracts and the symptoms start reversing, which is pretty freaking cool.
It is, yeah. And the amount of horses, right, that can be this pain can be alleviated from. Yeah, it's huge. And I took a class with Jillian Kreinbring, but she talks about the bad banana lecture. I know that you guys went to her lecture as well. And so I always have that imprinted in my mind. I'm like, oh, it's a bad banana. So it's an upside down banana. So it's just everything is drawing down and we need to reverse it. It should have this nice, right. It has to have that ebb and flow. And so really we want to almost flip that banana around where it's a nice rainbow arc. And so, yeah, I feel like I'm going to let Maeve and you guys jump into more of this, but I do find that those front limb lines and these lines are greatly impacted by pillar one. Yeah.
Yeah. So how does pillar work affect the superficial, ventral, and dorsal? This is a beautiful boy, Milo, and this was after one session with him. And he was a busy boy and he had a lot going on, but he's a perfect example. I mean, you kind of can't have, softening in the front limb lines without also talking to the superficial, ventral, and dorsal. That's why pillar one is so beautiful in unwinding the 4 front limb lines and then these 2 lines specifically. It's just more maybe visible, I guess. So pillar one, more visually, and probably the quickest to notice in all of these lines too. what restrictions do we most commonly see? So the most common restriction pathways we see in the superficial dorsal line. Again, either it's locked short and then the superficial ventral at the bottom locked long. So many of the dysfunctional patterns are consistent that we see. Common tension patterns are consistent with all of these when the front limb lines are unbalanced as well. So with Mr. Milo, the superficial dorsal line, when it is locked short, it adds tension to the pole, causing the AO again to want to get stuck back into flexion, contraction and tension of the splenius, restriction along the spine and pulling of the spine into extension. We also see tension in the psoas and hamstrings, often pulling the sacrum into either flexion or extension, but stuck either way. There's an element of it kind of getting stuck where it's at, which all causes a huge block in the fascial chain, constricts nerve pathways. The hind end tension from the contraction of the superficial dorsal line often is going to pull the femurs into an external rotation and present as a toed out posture. And the superficial ventral